Ladies and gentlemen, RTX 50 is set to be an absolute monstrous architecture for gaming, and it will really be a GPU architecture which will fix most of the weaknesses that we saw with RTX 40, especially VRAM, but also critically build upon the successes, and I'm expecting to see absolute huge performance uplifts according to my sources, perhaps up to 2 times in gaming, massive increases in ray tracing as well as path tracing, and just overall this will be an architecture that I feel will perhaps be on path to be one of the better architectures that Nvidia have launched in quite some time. But talking about VRAM capacity, in many ways Nvidia have set itself up to really push gamers to upgrade to RTX 50. We'll talk more about VRAM capacity in a moment when we get further into the video, but cards like the RTX 4090 in the RTX 40 series have been received very well, but cards like the RTX 4060 Ti have just faced tons of criticism. Not only do the cards not have enough VRAM, let's just totally ignore the 16GB card like Nvidia seems to be doing, but there's just not enough bandwidth anyway, and it doesn't have enough cache, so yeah, it's just been one of those weird GPU generations that I think will really benefit from technology like GDDR7. So, as you probably guessed from the video title then, we're going to be talking all about RTX 50, aka Blackwell, both some of my own information along with the information that's been circling around online, and just tell you how I feel that AMD will compete with all of this, and we're going to get into the video after this message from the video's sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
So let's begin with release schedules and what's happening right now with RTX 40. Nvidia's roadmap seems to indicate that RTX 50 shall not launch until 2025. It's a little later than previous rumours from myself as well as others. Now, it is possible that that information was incorrect, but I think it's more likely that there was a delay in the launch of the RTX 50 series, just not only to get things right, but probably more likely for part availability, such as GDDR7, which they're going to switch to, we'll get more into that in a moment, as well as the company wishing to ensure that it has the capacity of TSMC's N3 process. Now, those will be used, to my understanding, for the flagship gaming cards. We'll get more into that in a second, but it's no secret that at the moment, the world has just gone bonkers for AI. There's obviously the inference as well as training, with the training being much more taxing just to the nature of it. And we're talking about terabytes of data, and it's just so much computational workload. Just to give you an idea of the profits which are available here to a company like Nvidia, a company known as Inflection AI recently made headlines. They bought 22,000 H100 nodes. Now, I want you to pause the video for a second and just type in the comments how much you think each of those costs. I'm going to give you a second. Alright, the answer is $40,000 for each node. Now, there's basically a report going around that Nvidia will probably be pulling in around $300 billion in revenue thanks to artificial intelligence and HPC. To put that into some level of context, that's a 10-fold increase of what they're pulling in this year. Now, any company would be just crazy to ignore such incredible revenue. Obviously, a company exists to make profits and please shareholders. And I suppose the good news for gamers, this money will also be put into R&D. Basically, Nvidia, they feel it's a great way to push technology, and they do love gaming, but how many RTX 4060s or 90s would they need to make the same profit in terms of the sales numbers versus a company like Inflection AI? It's just like, you can kind of see where I'm going with this, guys. It's not that Nvidia is saying, screw you gamers. Nvidia and gaming have been, synonymous since the company's inception. It's just you know, while it's a major part of the company's values and history, and I truly do believe that with my conversations with people within Nvidia, it's just there's a priority on stuff, and pulling in that amount of cash is just very logical, and especially in such a competitive industry when you've got so many companies now. You know, even AMD are just going nuts after AI. So Nvidia are not going to want to sit still. Now, I also want to just briefly touch on a few other products for RTX 40 because I think it's important for context. I was initially told that there was a super refresh planned, and then it was canned, and this was by several sources. Coppertite 7 recently mentioned that there is, however, now a refresh incoming. I've spoken to a source of mine, haven't managed to double check this yet, as I added this pretty much last minute to the script, but they were one of the ones who told me that the plan refresh was killed, and now they're telling me that yes, it's coming back for select cards. Now, I do not know whether this is because RTX 50 is not going to launch until 2025, and again, it seemed like it was going to launch in 2024, or whether this is totally unrelated. Honestly, I'll let you guys decide that. I genuinely don't know the answer. The specs are still up in the air for this refresh, but, oh, as well as the name, by the way, this is not final. It could be called something entirely different. For example, we could see the RTX 4060 12GB. But anyway, the specifications, I'm going to refer to it as the Super, is 42 SM and 12 gigs of RAM, and that's based on AD104. And AD103 is for the 4070 Super with 68 SM, 16 gigabytes of RAM. Again, those specifications are undecided. They could certainly change. However, talking about the Titan for a moment, there was a tweet from T4C Fantasy. They are the manager of the Tech PowerUp GPU database, they're the editor of it, and they confirmed that Titan is being worked on yet again, matching my own information, but it could never launch. As far as I know, it is still happening this year, but it's Nvidia we're talking about here, and things just change on a dime with them. I've had a couple of folks tell me the Titan specs, but only a single one has told me the TBP. You can read them on screen: 142 SM, 96 megabytes of L2, up to 2520 megahertz boost, and 48 gigabytes of RAM. The eye-raising thing here is the 650 watt TBP. Maybe this is for a test board. We saw exactly the same thing happen with the RTX 4090. We saw crazy power consumption figures, and then it got pulled back, and honestly, Lovely scales pretty well with power, but it doesn't need a whole lot, so maybe this is for, again, a test board. What I will say though is that AD102, which of course powers the Titan, assume it ever launches, and of course the 4090, it's also used in a number of professional cards, so it's possible that Titan is just being delayed a lot. In fact, I have heard that, because it's A, going to be very expensive, and B, those fully functional dies are probably going to be wanting to be placed into something else that is for professionals and they can make even larger margins on. Also, like I've said in previous videos, according to everything I've heard, the 4090 Ti is probably dead. The main reason, again, is because of the margins. With the Titan, they can charge a ridiculous premium price by saying, oh, look how much RAM it's got. The Titan and the 4090 Ti basically are identical in specs from my understanding. Coppertite has also said that it seems to be dead in a recent tweet. There will be other GPUs that Nvidia will launch, of course, in the lower end, for example the 4050. This could have a lot of potential thanks to things like DLSS, but of course it's going to depend on the final specifications and how much they nerf it, and I'm going to leave it to you to kind of speculate on that one. Anyway, who cares about RTX 40? Let's talk about RTX 50. Let's zero in on it, and a great place to start about this are newer memory standards. I did put out a video a day or two ago regarding this, but GDDR7 and how it will hopefully enable Nvidia to increase VRAM capacity, and this could be beneficial not just for lower end but also higher end GPUs. Generally speaking, the 4060 Ti has had a lot of complaints concerning the VRAM capacity of 8GB. Let's do what even Nvidia seem to do and just ignore the meme card that is the 16GB. Honestly, if that thing was choked anymore for memory bandwidth, I feel like I just need to call the cops on Nvidia for murdering the poor little fella. But anyway, a 4060 card moving into the next generation is a great example how we could benefit from higher density RAM. So With this particular card here, you can see that it's using K4ZAF325BC-SC20 from Samsung. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And if you look at their website, it's no surprise you're seeing 16 GB or 2 GB each module, and they're running at up to 20 Gbps. So that, of course, means you're looking at 8 GB total thanks to 4 modules. We've seen some reports online backing up my leaks that we're going to see GDDR7 for the RTX 50. This is my earlier RTX 50 leaks. And it seems that they will be using a greater density for GDDR7. There's a 16 GB, but there's also 24. This would mean 3 GB per chip. So this would mean that in the case of, let's say, the 4060 Ti, even with the same bus configuration, basically, let's just keep things simple, we're looking at 12 gigs of RAM. That's actually pretty impressive, and of course these modules have been officially confirmed by the memory vendor. Also, what I'm told so far, and we are talking about stuff that doesn't launch until 2025 onwards, so this stuff has not been taped out, and I could have older information or just incorrect info. There are some big architectural differences between Lovelace and RTX 50. On the surface level, it seems that some of the basics will be similar. The SM cores still seem to be 12 per GPC, but GB104 seems to go up to the high teens in GPC. I've been told 16 to 18 from different sources, clocks going over 3 GHz. Higher end Blackwell cards for gaming, as I alluded to earlier, are going to be produced on TSMC's 3nm process, but lower end, cheaper cards, for example the 5060, they're going to be produced on 4nm. This also means that it's, well, cheaper to produce, but also saves that precious 3nm capacity for data center and stuff like that. A few other tidbits. Speaking to multiple people, it seems that there are going to be some big changes across the SM structure. Unfortunately, I cannot get specifics as of the time I'm recording this. So, for example, what the actual ratio of FP32 units is and other bits and bobs, I just don't know. What I was told, is that the legacy of older NVIDIA architectures is not followed as closely, but that doesn't really mean much, and I don't want to speculate too much because otherwise my speculation is going to become part of the rumor, and I don't really want that to happen. What I was also told is the new bus structure around the chip, and big changes across the caches in L2. It seems that the L2 cache, according to one source anyway, is the same, and it seems that there's still a monolithic die for the high-end gaming variants. This makes sense when you think about it, because L2 cache already eats up quite a bit of space for various Lovelace GPUs. Allegedly, a combination of GDDR7, better caching, and all of the other stuff just goes together to mean that the extra SMs are fed. Ray tracing and tensor cores see significant updates to again improve efficiency. I've been told by another source, and I cannot get this confirmed, so do take this with massive quantities of salt, that the 4th generation RT cores are aiming at double, so 2x times the ray intersection performance, and we're also going to see improvement to some of the other tech which RTX 40 introduced, for example opacity micro maps. Of course it does need developers to actually, well, use that, but that's beside the point. Tensor cores will also see changes as well. Allegedly it's going to improve denoising of ray tracing and path traced. We've seen NVIDIA work a lot on this, and honestly, I have also heard from some other sources that there are some changes to how denoising actually works for RTX 50, but I can't get anything specific. So let's just quickly go over the rumors. So it seems to be based on Blackwell. GB102, which is going to feature in 5090, etc., is going to be 3nm. Lower end parts, for example, 107, that's going to again be a monolithic 4nm. The 102 die size estimate is 620. But do take that with some massive quantities of salt. It's possible it could end up smaller or less likely larger. GB100 is going to be for the HPC and possibly chiplet based. Gaming cards can support GDDR7 up to 24 GB modules. So again, that means each module can have 3 GB of RAM. So you can have 12 GB on a 128-bit bus. 3 GHz seems to be the clock frequency, but of course we're not on final production silicon yet, so those targets could be greatly exceeded or just missed. A new SM structure, moving away from the legacy design. I was also told of a hyperbus link, which seems to just go over various elements of the chip, for example SMs. I'm not certain, however, whether this is for the chiplet-based designs only or whether it also affects monolithic. GB102 performance is about 2 times in compute, and gaming performance is almost 2x over the GA102. We are referring here to full die versus full die. I'll get more into the specifications in a moment. RT improvements, well, you can read yourself. Next generation OMM and DMM, 2x ray triangle intersection and denoising accelerator. It could be part of a tensor core, some type of new software algorithm, I'm honestly not sure. Curiously, Coppertite also tweeted that the flagship can handle 512-bit. I was personally told though the 102 is just 384. Now Coppertite generally has really good information, so he definitely could be right and my info could totally be wrong, or it could be 2 variants which are being tested. I honestly do not know. It's very possible that my info is just slightly older and his is more up to date. With that said, let's talk about the early specifications. GB103 is 108 SM, 64 megabytes L2 and 256 bit. And then of course you could see the 102 here goes to 204 SM, 96 megabytes L2, 384 bit. Again, Coppertite is stating the highest end cards are 512. You will also notice, of course, that this is for the highest configuration possible. So for example, the 5090 could have fewer SM enabled, or it could have 80 megabytes of L2 or whatever. Now you will also notice the L2 cache of the 102 seems the same, for example, the current 102s from Lovelace. Judging from what I've heard about Nvidia versus AMD strategy moving to the next generation, I think it's likely that RTX 50 at the highest end will outperform AMD. I'd love to be wrong about this, and of course AMD definitely can battle it out for mid-range as well as just better pricing. So we could see, for example, the 8600 XT or whatever really stick it to Nvidia, but honestly Nvidia just seems to intent to produce the most powerful design possible. This is not seemingly what AMD wish to do. We've seen comments from David Wang, for example, at AMD as well as others, that it just doesn't seem to be what they want to do. I personally would love them to compete in that area, but they just don't want to do it. Nvidia meanwhile are like, oh, 600 watts? Sure, whatever. Die size the size of, your entire PC? That's absolutely okay. Like, they don't care. They want the highest end product. RDNA as well as an architecture is going to continue to evolve. Most know that CDNA 1 and 2, for example, were based upon Vega, albeit with some changes. From what I understand, CDNA 4 onwards will move towards RDNA base. I think it's RDNA 3, essentially a tweaked architecture. So basically speaking, the architectures will separate and will be optimized for gaming or compute, depending on what's needed. So yeah, how will AMD really be able to counter this? The early reports for RDNA 4, especially for myself, was that we were going to be seeing multiple compute dies. Basically, those dies were going to sit on a base tile with the dies featuring the ROPs, or should I say housing the ROPs, the shaders, the texture mapping units, etc., etc. And then the base tile, the base die, would basically hold things like, well, the display engine and obviously all of the interconnects, which would then in turn go out to the MCDs, which in turn, of course, would connect to the memory. Now, I'm sure that there are some details that I was missing on those earlier rumours, but that was largely how it seemed to be working. But this no longer seems to be the case. Multiple of my sources have told me that while that was the plan at one point or another, it is no longer the plan, and it seems that there is only a single GCD planned, a little bit like we saw with N31, for example. The difference is, of course, that that was produced on the N5 process, and from what the rumours have been online, AMD will be targeting N3 with the higher-end RDNA 4 parts. So that combined with perhaps just going with a slightly larger die size, who knows, with AMD, and there could be a lot of performance there. Early reports from what my sources have said is that they're looking at around 60 workgroup processors, not compute units, 60 workgroup processors. However, that figure could definitely still be increased or decreased because it's not at the final stages yet. It's not even at tape out stage. So obviously those figures can definitely change. And if that's true, it probably will not be able to compete with something like the RTX 5090. Ultimately though, I think from AMD's perspective, they are not volume cards. For example, the 5090. Instead, gamers just are not really willing to spend, at least on average, like $1,500, $2,000 bucks. Now, from a selfish point of view, as someone who loves to see the high-end market get pushed and, of course, high-end competition, I would love AMD to just take the gloves off and just slap, you know, screw it, you do what you want sign to the engineer's neck and just say, just go crazy. But I don't think they will. And I think that is a bit of a shame. Now, obviously, the fact of the matter is they can still compete, you know, in various other tiers, and I also wouldn't be necessarily upset if RDNA 4 is very performant in those tiers at lower power consumption than NVIDIA, or at least comparable. We've already seen the recent patent for the ray tracing, which seems, from what I'm hearing anyway, definitely to be RDNA 4 based, and that would mean that it essentially has dedicated BVH traversal, like NVIDIA. I'm hearing that the performance is not quite as good as, you know, what we're going to see with Blackwell. It's very difficult to know at the moment because obviously we're talking about rumours of unreleased chips and God knows what the state of those engineering samples was. However, I think NVIDIA are still going to have the ray tracing advantage. It's going to be very interesting. I will be super intrigued to see what the mid-range options are like for the next generation, both from AMD and of course NVIDIA, but also Intel as well. At the end of the day, I am a whore when it comes to graphics. I have been for a long time. And I was that kid who didn't even have a PC, well, at least one capable of running a Voodoo 1 back in the day. And I was looking at, like, you know, screenshots of what a Voodoo 1, or what crap was that card called? Was it Rendition? It felt like it was Rendition, but there's a part of my brain that's like, no, it wasn't the Verite Rendition? Let me know in the comments or DM me on Twitter or something like that. I'll probably Google it after the video if my brain, you know, remembers to do that. However, anyway, I remember being super excited about that. And I didn't even know what the hell was texture mapping. I didn't know at the time. I was bloody young. I just had, like, you know, the odd magazine here or there to read. And it's just like, that sounds cool. Like gorge shading, what's that? I don't know, but it sounds better than just regular shading. You know, that's just how kind of your brain worked. Well, at least mine. And then obviously, you know, we start to get like the Voodoo 2 stuff, and I grabbed it immediately, the Voodoo 2. As soon as I had a PC to run that bugger, I got it. And I was playing like Half-Life 1 and Quake 2 and even Quake 1, like seriously. What was it? Tomb Raider 2 as well, I think. And then immediately, the second 3DFX announced Voodoo 3, excuse me, you better believe that I don't know how the hell I managed to, you know, get my cash together. But yeah, as a kid, I managed to get like a Voodoo 3. But those cards were so damn cheap, you know, well, at least comparatively. Look how much like the Voodoo 3 2000 cost. I'm going on a complete tangent, by the way. But yeah, the Voodoo 3 2000, I think I picked up the 2000, the PCI version, because it was really, yeah, I got it new, but it was like, it was already on sale. Maybe because NVIDIA were kicking their ass or something, I don't know. But I remember, or maybe the PCI version wasn't as popular as the AGP, I don't know. But I don't even know if my motherboard had AGP. This is so long ago, guys. Anyway, I picked this thing up, and it was the best thing I ever did, because the PCI version I had, not PCIe, might I add, I think it clocked from like 143 to like 190 odd, like 195. I mean, seriously, that's bonkers. I mean, we've seen cards kind of like, you know, do that after that, like the was it the 9500 or something like that, the Radeon 9500, where you could unlock it, soft mod. I don't know, my brain. I think it was the 9500 to 9700 or something like that. Anyway, the point is, guys, that, you know, back then GPU upgrades were really cool and so awesome. And I've always been into high-end PC hardware and graphics, so this stuff does genuinely interest me. Anyway, I am gonna let you guys go because I think you probably don't really want me to talk about retro gaming hardware like, you know, 20 years ago. So I'll let you guys go. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.